Welcome to the Butter Notes podcast with three guys who have no business listening to music, much less talking about it. All right, welcome back to the Butter Notes podcast. This is Jim here. I'm with Jake and Tone. We're going to talk about 2010's Prog Metal today, and Tone does not think that it's going to be good.
He's usually pretty pessimistic about these, and then he's wrong, so I'm not worried about it.
He's probably right.
I just examined the evidence like a true galaxy brain scientistic individual, and the evidence as it has been presented to me thus far indicates the probability that this will be a very bad episode of a pretty bad podcast.
And that evidence is the only evidence is that we're the ones doing the podcast, so he might be right. Actually, now that I think about it,
I am right. It's somewhat inarguable.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, being the form of logic, would you please analyze the validity of Anthony's argument?
So I'm going to require a Wittgensteinian proof that Periphery 2 is their best work.
I disagree with it, therefore it is wrong.
All right, I guess we'll dive in here. First album today is Periphery 2 by Periphery, believe it or not. When did this come out? 2011?
2012. Positive 2012. I guess this is the earliest one of the five. That's surprising to me for some reason.
Only about
Dude, these five albums are clustered across 3 years.
Yeah, it's true. We had a discussion about that when we were trying to figure out which ones to pick, because I mean it's been a whole decade, and then we ended up clustering in the middle. But I really do think the kind of seminal records of 2010's prog metal do cluster around this point, and it was a pretty sick time to be a prog metal fan around the early 2010s.
Yeah, like all 70s progressive rock, all clusters around the early 70s. That's just sometimes how it happens.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, that's not to say the later albums from these bands aren't excellent. It's just as an entry point, I think we kind of all agreed that these might be the albums to go with. There are a couple of disagreements, but nothing major. So it's not like definitive, but I think it's a pretty good shot at a starter pack if you're looking to get into this stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. Jake, you described Periphery the other day as a boy band for metalheads?
Boy band for metalcore kids, yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Well, and what made me think about that is my girlfriend loves K-pop and she loves BTS, and she just constantly watches videos of like all the band BTS guys, whatever, doing. I don't even know what they're doing half the time. They're just on some shows talking to each other and laughing and stuff. I don't know. And then
Korean?
In Korean, yeah, and there's the subtitles and everything. And so then I was, sometimes I'm like, I wouldn't want to watch that. And then I find myself watching like tons and tons of Periphery studio updates and interviews, and like I know all of the drama that Misha Mansour, the guitarist, the and founding member of the band, got into. Like I know all this, like, I don't know. Yeah, all this drama stuff, and so then I'm just like
tabloid trivia.
Yeah, tabloid trivia, and so then I just thought, well, yeah, I think this is just the equivalent of a boy band for metalcore kids, and it's kind of like, I mean, I wouldn't want to use the word supergroup exactly, but they brought in a lot of like kind of well-known people within the scene to work on this project. I mean, they weren't super well established when they started or anything like that, but I think on the internet, like it wasn't just like a group of friends or people in the same community. A lot of it was done online and or like through playing through shows with other bands and stuff, and the group kind of formed around that. And ultimately, I mean, I guess first and foremost, it started with Misha Mansour on, I think, the website SoundClick. He would just like upload all sorts of riffs and music ideas and stuff, and then I guess hit up Jake Bowen, the rhythm guitarist, and they started fleshing out the ideas for those tracks, and ended up with Periphery 1, and then of course brought on Matt Halpern, the drummer, and Spencer Sotelo, the vocalist, and then we get Nolly Get Good, the bassist on this, and then they bring on Mark Holcomb, third guitarist. And yeah, if you go online and like look up, they just have like on Misha Mansour's YouTube page. There's just like all sorts of like fan engagement stuff, and so that's what makes me think they're kind of like a boy band.
So does that mean that any band that has like a lot of fan engagement and where people like follow the personal members and like interpersonal relationships of the band members, does that In any case where that's happening, does that make it a boy band?
No, not actually. It's mostly just a joke. Point of comparison. I mean, it's similar to that experience, I guess, but no, they're not actually a boy band.
I thought of it more in the context of the actual sound of the music.
I mean, drama. I mean, there's some things like Misha Mansour got into some drama with Chris Barretto, who was their vocalist at one point. I think he went to be the vocalist of Monuments, the band Monuments, and then I don't know what he's doing now. And then he had some drama with the guitarist for the Harp Machine at one point online. There's all these like blog posts being traded back and forth about like studio playthroughs or something of their songs. And then there was the stuff about Mark Holcomb and what's her name? Yvette Young, I think's her name. So it's just some like, I don't know, stuff like that. Like I feel like people follow this group because they seem to be really transparent with their recording process, and they're all like really honest in interviews and stuff. And so I think people really like that about Periphery. I think that's one thing that draws a lot of people at Periphery, because you really get to see the creative, a lot, not all of it, but you get to see a decent look into like the creative process for this band. And I think that's a bit different from pretty different from the other four bands we're talking about. And in a lot of ways, Periphery is, I think, like maybe the most influential band for the way the sound of progressive like metal in the 2010s kind of developed. And Misha had his hand in a lot of production and songwriting for other bands. Like Misha helped write Eclipse by Veil of Maya, and he helped write Animals as Leaders' first album. So you can just, the sound is like ubiquitous. The kind of sound they introduce is kind of ubiquitous across 2010s prog metal.
Yeah, I think it's almost inarguable that Periphery would be the most influential band on the sound that the genre took in this decade. They're definitely not my favorite band that we're going to talk about tonight, even though I do love Periphery, but the fact that they're the most influential, I think, is almost inarguable. Like almost every band and like the new style of prog metal that has started over the past 10-15 years is like in the shadow of Periphery to some degree. Some of them I think have even eclipsed them in terms of like quality, in my opinion, but they're still in their shadow influence wise.
Well, I definitely agree. I noticed something about Periphery as opposed to the other four bands we'll talk about. I don't think there's been much of a sonic shift in Periphery's music over the course of their like discography. They seem to me, not, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but they seem to me to be a band who introduced a sound and has taken successive steps at just refining that sound. So whether it's getting better at production, whether the vocals have improved, whether the songwriting's gotten tighter, or things like that. But it doesn't seem to me like sonically they haven't changed much, as opposed to like another band like Leprous, who we'll be talking about later, who's while there's the roots of like what their later stuff and their earlier stuff, there's still a noticeable departure across their discography as they move along. And I think to me, Periphery is like the only band who there's no radical departure from what they were doing at the start, though they have gotten a lot better as players and producers and things like that.
Oh, Periphery's definitely gotten more electro. Not that they're extremely electro now, but like in the first two albums, the electro moments are mainly just like outros, which kind of feel tacked on. Even though I like them, they're kind of just tacked on to the end of a bunch of songs. But they integrate that electro stuff, which is mainly Misha doing it, if I'm not wrong. They integrated a lot more into the actual songs as the catalog goes on, in my opinion.
I think it's a collaboration. So Jake Bowen has his like solo stuff is all electronic stuff, and a lot of those outros you're hearing are from like his solo work. And so he has a few electronic albums. So what's the track? I guess I think it's right after Aracid on this album. I think that was just like repurposed from Jake's. I can't even think the name of it, but it was repurposed from Jake Bowen's solo stuff. And then Misha, I know, did do some like messing around with electronic stuff. And a lot of stuff that's cool about Periphery is if you've been following the band for a while, and I think Misha recently released like his archives under his pseudonym Bulb, and so there's like 8 albums, and then there's an electronic album, and a lot of that stuff you could hear like if you were following them back when MySpace was still a thing, or like people passing the tracks around on YouTube and stuff, or you can hear like the nuggets of ideas from songs that would later appear on albums and stuff. And so they do a lot of like digging through old archives and reworking songs at a certain time they didn't think they could flesh out entirely, but then later they dig it back out and go, hey, this is a good idea, and maybe we try this. And so a lot of the songs we find later, and I think that's also true for electronic stuff. So, and yeah, most of the time it's usually Misha, some of his older stuff he reworked, or it's repurposed from Jake's solo stuff.
How do you bros feel about like the electro outros on this album and on the first album?
I like them. I think it breaks up that. I think they break up the albums pretty nicely. The pacing of the albums pretty nicely, and I just like that style of electronic music, like just really, like chill wave kind of. Yeah, I guess we call it chill wave or something like that. Yeah, it's just like really, it's just really relaxing kind of, and I think it breaks up the album and creates a nice atmosphere. And they usually do a good job of leading it into like transitioning it into the next track. So I like that kind of music. I listen to Jake Bowen's solo stuff, so I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, I like it too. The pace is so forward on so many of these songs, and the electronic parts just like give you kind of a break in between the really balls to the wall moments.
I kind of wonder why they chose to like actually make it an outro of the song itself and not just like short interlude tracks, because they don't often flow organically from the song. Like the song like ends and then we get the electro outro. It just feels a little bit inorganic to me, which I mean, it's Periphery, so there's a degree, I don't know, it's not like organic isn't typically the word people would even use to describe this band, so maybe it doesn't matter. It's not like a huge hang up I have.
Yeah, so something I really liked about this album, I ended up getting the CD of it eventually, but back when it first came out, I was primarily listening to it on, I had it on iTunes when that was still a thing, and then I listened to it on YouTube, and for each of these tracks, and I think this is the only album where they did this, Misha, Mark, and Jake would write little synopses of the songs, like a little bit about how they came to like the songwriting process and stuff. And I can't remember exactly which tracks. You could go on the YouTube on Sumerian Records YouTube page and find the tracks. And I think they explain a bit why they added the outros and stuff in there. And I can't remember exactly what the explanation was, but I think it basically just boils down to like, hey, we thought this would be a good place to add this, and it helps break up the pacing of the album because it, like James mentioned, it's, you know, it can be pretty balls to the wall, chaotic. And yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the nature of Periphery's music, especially the first record. I mean, that's to me like one of the most frenetic and like maybe even their most technical album. There's really it's just an assault the entire time.
Yeah, Periphery does definitely get a lot more melodic and catchier, probably, as the catalog goes on. Like on Juggernaut, we get Homeless Heart is the name of the track, right? That's one of my favorite Periphery songs, and like that continues on. I think I feel like
Heavy
Periphery
Heart
too.
On
Heavy Heart.
Heavy Heart. I don't know why I said Homeless.
That's a good
Heart.
track.
That's one of my favorites. Periphery 2 probably has the least amount of stuff like that. Like there are some really like big melodic choruses on Periphery 1 that I love. Periphery 2 I feel like is probably the least catchy of their material, and that's kind of my favorite side of the band. So that's kind of why, like, on it, Periphery 2 is probably my least favorite Periphery album, and that might be why. I always try to figure out why, because I know a lot of people consider it their best work. It's my least favorite, I would say, and I can never quite figure out why, and maybe that's why.
I don't think it'd be the pop hooks, because, like, some of the biggest tunes on this album have those huge pop hooks.
And
like
those are the
Have a
best
Blast,
ones.
Luck is a Constant.
Scarlet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think most people agree on that end. Scarlet's
by far the best track.
There's still tons of that. It's probably not my favorite, but I like Scarlet.
So I guess it's a good point to talk about. A lot of people hate this band because of Spencer. Like they hate his vocals, and people will write them off completely. And they just like, he sounds like a pop singer, and they're just ham-fisting it over the. And I will give it to them, and the band will agree that on the first album, that's exactly what happened. So if you listen to Periphery 1 and then the transition to Periphery 2, you will notice a huge difference in the quality of the vocals, and part of that is owing to production. Part of that's owing to the fact that Spencer, like on the first album, I think he was brought in like 2 weeks before the finalization of the album. It was like okay, here, because they already had like a cut of the album with the old vocalists, and then they're like, okay, now we're gonna record your vocals, and he didn't have much direction. But also on Periphery 1, those songs were written basically as instrumentals first, without like any mind toward the vocalist. So then there was literally no space for the vocals to work. But one thing I really like about Spencer is his adaptability and versatility, I think, and he comes up with these really interesting hooks, even if they're not super catchy. So the chorus on G, like that song, if you listen to it instrumentally, it doesn't seem like that song should have a chorus at all. And he comes up with that it's really a really weird chorus, but he makes it work really well. And I think he's just really creative in that respect. And I wish people would give him more credit. Like, if you don't like his voice, I totally understand. But just like the craftsmanship and his talent, I don't think people can argue with that, really.
He's Spencer. An undeniable talent. I mean, the guy's a fucking phenom, dude. He's a total virtuoso.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely agree.
It's interesting that it's interesting that he turns people off so quickly.
He turns a certain amount of people. He turns a certain amount and a certain kind of people off quickly. I don't think he turns that many people off.
Maybe not. It might just be that there are a bunch of outliers in my own life.
That's what I was about to say.
I can think of a few people who have like who have a pretty open mind about music who absolutely can't stand Periphery because of Spencer's vocals.
I will bet you, if you talk to most Periphery fans, that they all know at least one distinct individual who doesn't like this band, who otherwise might like the band, but they don't like it because of the vocals. I bet most Periphery fans know a person like that. I would not be surprised if that were the case. But I think
he's one of my favorite singers doing music right now, man.
Yeah,
like Spencer's ridiculously good.
Yeah, his highs are crazy.
The vocals on Reptile and Garden in the Bones on Periphery 4 are just fucking outstanding. The guy is ridiculous.
Stranger Things might be my favorite work from Spencer. That might be their best. That might be the best Periphery song.
That's such a great song.
That's probably my favorite.
Of them. That's definitely
song.
Dude. Yeah, Omega into Stranger Things. That run is fucking amazing.
The intro of Stranger Things is so fucking good. I think Juggernaut is actually leagues above P2, but P2 probably is more like essential to like figure out the style, and it's more historically important. So I get why we're choosing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Juggernaut would be my favorite too from Periphery.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was consuming a ton of Periphery media, and I think the band would say retrospectively they looked back at like when they were recording these albums, and they just talk about how much it sucked to record these albums because they were doing a lot of it themselves, and they mentioned that they didn't have like the group chemistry there, and their communication wasn't great because I mean they have three guitarists, and they basically write the music with the three guitarists, and then they might get input from the other guys, but then they come into the studio, and a lot of times they're working independently, so the guitars will be tracked and Nolly will work with them, and then Matt and Nolly will go do the drums somewhere else, and then sometimes Spencer's in a completely different place. And so when they wrote this album and Juggernaut, they talked about how much they just hated their lives doing it because Juggernaut was just such an ambitious undertaking that was many, many years in the works, kind of. And I think once you get to Periphery 3, that's where you see them like really focus in on their craft and their sound and really perfect that. And yeah, I don't know. So these first couple albums, I feel like are albums for fans of Periphery, whereas like Periphery 3 and Periphery 4, I might recommend to people who that's what I was thinking, like maybe Periphery 3 and Periphery 4 might be a good starting point, but I also just think Periphery 1 and Periphery 2 like as the starter pack for this genre or this subgenre that we're doing makes the most sense.
Going back to Spencer, I think honestly Spencer's vocals are kind of what make Periphery unique, because if Periphery were an instrumental band, they'd be good and I'd like it. But there are like 1.5 million instrumental gent bands that would sound exactly like that. Like 2,000, like 1 million. Like they're all, those bands proliferated enormously in the 2010s. And like Periphery might be like better than, like obviously would have pioneered the sound and whatnot, but they would kind of blend into all those other groups, or not even, they're usually not even groups, they're usually just solo like projects. But honestly, I think Spencer's vocals and the vocal hooks are kind of what like make Periphery stand out, at least to my ears.
I actually totally agree. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they wouldn't be unique instrumentally, but it's the vocals that really make them stand out, I think.
I think what sets them apart instrumentally is they do a lot of guitar solos, and that's not something a lot of those gent bands did. Or if they did, I don't know, like really creative guitar solos. Misha and Mark cook up some really interesting guitar solos, and then there's they have really wacky gent riffs. So it's not just, if you listen to, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of another gent band that's kind of, I don't want to shit on this band, but kind of cookie cutter. There's a band, I think they're Australian. It's a band called Circles, and it's just I don't know, it's just kind of bare bones gent, and that's kind of what I think Anthony's kind of talking about with Periphery. I think you get really interesting creative riffs, even though, because people talk about how it can, this stuff can be kind of robotic and repetitive, which I don't know exactly what that means, but I can, it's really atonal, and so I guess from that perspective, because there's not a lot of melody in the rhythms and some of the riffs, but there's still a distinctive Periphery sound, in my opinion. And another thing that sets them apart is the production value. I think they're maybe the best in the business at producing their albums. They have some of the best,
at least
albums.
now.
Yeah.
At least now.
Yeah. I would say starting with...
Dude, Periphery 4 is fucking gorgeous.
Periphery 3 is on par with that production-wise, I think.
It is very, very good.
Yeah, if Periphery were an instrumental band... If Periphery were an instrumental band, I think that they would be very much above average to excellence compared to that enormous plethora of instrumental gent projects that exist. I think that they would stand out still, but I think the vocals are what really make them stand out as a totally, maybe not a totally unique thing, but unique enough.
It brings them to a different level. I think it brings brings them to a different level. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Spencer's a huge part of this for sure.
And it's those it's that pop sensibility we were talking about that does it. I think the chorus in Have a Blast, or the outro there in Luck is a Constant. It's just fucking catchy.
Or all of Frog and Bullfish. That song's really catchy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That riff, and then yeah. Oh, and we should also mention the 2 guest solos on this. They've got some pretty big names. So they got Guthrie Govan in Have a Blast, and then they got John Petrucci to do a solo, who is also Jake Bowen's uncle, and they got him to do a solo in Erised. So that's a cool little crossover.
I got to shout out Mile Zero too. When I listened to this the other day, that song stuck out, and I've heard this 500 times.
Yeah, so the back end of this album, and then also The Gods Must Be Crazy and Make Total Destroy, were songs that I kind of I love those songs, but I always overlooked them for other ones. But on subsequent listens, I'm like, man, I don't know why I slept on these tracks so much. They're pristine. They're really good.
The Gods Must Be Crazy usually is a track that always stands out to me, honestly, from this album. I think it's
it's one of the singles,
short songs.
Either that or Make Total Destroy. I can't remember which one of those two was the singles from this album. And Scarlet, of course, is the single, which was a repurposed Haunted Shores song. So that was originally written as an instrumental, and that's my point. That song is so catchy, and I think that proves my point about Spencer. That song was originally an instrumental, and then he just lays this beautiful vocal line over top of the whole track. So I think that song just proves my point, and that's deceptively. I think Mark Holcomb says deceptively one of the most difficult songs to play, because it's basically just all leads the entire time.
I've never thought of it that way. I always think about that as one of the more vocal songs.
Yeah, Spencer is the star of Scarlet.
Yeah, and it's funny because he wasn't even involved in writing. That song was written at least a year before this album came out.
I saw them play Scarlet back in 2019. Have you guys seen Periphery?
I haven't actually.
I need to. I would love to.
Oh, that's a fucking awesome show, dude. Definitely catch them if they come back around.
I believe that.
Did you see them with
I
Dance
think they're in
Gone
the
Dance
studio
on
right
that
now
tour?
for Periphery 5. No, I missed that one. I saw them with Covet and Veil of Maya.
Oh, nice. Covet's
awesome.
Yvette Young, and Veil of Maya is Mark Okubo, who's buddies with. He's actually, I think Mark Okubo is featured in Juggernaut Omega on Stranger Things. He's one of the like chanting vocals at the end.
Oh, cool.
He's in that choir that they did. Yeah, he was there for that. But yeah, this is my point. This is why I love Periphery so much, and this is why I compare them to a boy band, because they're so interconnected into everything else that happens in 2010s, and they know a lot of people, and they have a lot of friends in the scene. And I mean, they're a main ticket now. Like they were doing supporting stuff for a while, but now they're the headliners on a lot of tours, and a lot of up and coming bands and stuff will support them or open for them, and they're just cool to like know the connections. Like if you really want to like deep dive Periphery and like knowing the connections, like all of the solo stuff these guys work on, all of the features they've had, all of the stuff, like the members have produced various albums. I think Nolly has produced at least one of these other albums that we'll be talking about. We can look into that, but stuff like that, just like all of the archives, like it just stuff goes back and forward. Like this band is so interconnected into everything else that's happening, and so it always surprised me a little bit with the people who don't like them but like later stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but they were heavily influenced by Periphery, like in some way. Periphery's touched them in some way, which is it's really cool.
Yeah, I think they're kind of the quintessential 2010s prog band, honestly, or it's prog metal band anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that.
Them or Haken, but they're fulfilling different functions.
Yeah.
Ross Jennings gave Nolly a thank you in the liner notes on the Troika album, which I thought was interesting. Are they like, I don't know if they're like personal friends or
dude,
anything.
Nolly touches fucking everything now, dude. That guy's hands are on everything.
Yeah.
He didn't produce The Mountain, which we'll talk about later, but he produced the last two Haken albums.
Yes.
Vector and Virus.
That's right.
He definitely did not produce the Troika album. That would be hilarious if he did. So I was wondering why he got a thank you. Maybe just because him and Ross are buddies.
They might just
something.
be mates. They're both British. They must just be mates.
Nolly's British.
Yeah.
I also wouldn't be surprised if Nolly went into the studio and helped them like get their drum sound or something. He's really good at doing that and bass sound. Like the bass tone on Juggernaut is so fucking deep and like guttural like that, and it's unlike any of the other Periphery album. Like that's something that's really cool. Is just like to listen to like the sonic like the atmosphere. And Nolly's like super instrumental in crafting the sound for a lot of the instruments. And I think that's something that's been influential. And maybe these other bands go and produce things on their own. But I still think that's like a standard for like a good like prog metal 2010s prog metal sound. So that's what I mean by it. Yeah, this band is just you can't.
Neil Morse called him up saying, "I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know how to record an album in the studio. I need help."
It could happen. Nolly's a genius at this stuff, man. He really is.
Yeah, he's a hell of a producer without a doubt. All right, let's take a turn here. So we're going to move on to 2013. We got Coal by Leprous.
Yeah, Leprous are by far, maybe not by far, but they are my favorite band of these five.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, pound for pound, like the whole discography, I think it's between them and like for the discography, it's not necessarily my favorite albums or whatever, but like Leprous and Periphery pound for pound might be the leading groups for me in this bunch. And interestingly, this band started as a backing band for Isan, who's a symphonic black metal act from Norway. And so they started as the backing band for Isan and then broke off and did their own thing and brought Einar. I don't know if Einar Solberg was part of the backing band. I actually don't know the history exactly, but that's just an interesting little piece of trivia for their origins of this band.
Einar is one of the best vocalists in any genre in any band in any genre working right now. Unbelievable singer. And I feel like Coal, I think, is really the album where Leprous find the Leprous sound. Bilateral and Tall Poppy Syndrome are both fucking awesome, but I think that their influences were on their sleeve a lot more on those two albums, and I think Coal is really where they find their sound 100%. I think Einar has a lot to do with that. Einar's really technically accomplished cleans and a lot of those long kind of wordless vocal melodies that he does. That really starts on Coal, and that becomes a major part of Leprous's sound. Man, I fucking love Coal. Every track on here is just a 10 out of 10 in my opinion.
Well, then I think Bard Koldstad, who we get on the next album, The Congregation, is also like to me nowadays, like I don't want to malign the guitarists because they do excellent work, but in the later stuff, that stuff's much like it's toned down. It's like given a backseat to the like Bard's percussion and then Einer's vocals and like atmosphere creating with like electronic stuff. So that vision is kind of moved, and I agree with you. Yeah, Tall Poppy Syndrome and Bilateral. Like I love Bilateral. It's probably my second favorite of the albums, but those two are much more influenced, like obviously influenced by like the symphonic prog stuff, I think. Whereas this starts to approach the more like art rock sound that they're kind of working on now, I think. And then that you really start to see them solidify that in the next album, The Congregation. But this one is to me is like a transitional album between that more symphonic stuff and the more art rock stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And this album is really a gateway for me because I've discovered over the past few years like how amazing of an art rock scene Scandinavia has. Norway, Sweden, even Iceland, Denmark, and Leprous to me is more on the progressive side of that. But they're definitely one of the forerunners of that scene. I think at least in the 2010s. Some really good art rock bands from up there.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much any genre of music, there's an awesome scene for it in Scandinavia. I don't know what it is. There's like something in the water in Northern Europe or something that makes so many fucking people there amazing in music. Yeah, the Leprous sound, I like... If you had to like pick one or two bands to compare Leprous to, Cole and Onward, like who would they be? Like it's hard to choose. And I feel like that... Not like originality isn't like I think it's overvalued, but I do have to respect the fact that I can't even really think of like bands to directly compare Leprous to.
It's a good point. I could do it if I put more thought to it, but I agree with you. It's not readily available. Like Periphery, I could think yes, Meshuggah. Periphery, it's Meshuggah and Sixth. Like that's where that's their influences or two of their influences. But I can't do that easily for Leprous.
Like you could name 1,000 bands that are influencing Leprous, but Leprous doesn't really sound like any of those bands, at least not entirely. And I don't know, that doesn't happen very often. And Leprous are a band that achieved that, and I think Cole is really where they achieve it for the first time, 100%.
James, you only recently listened to this album, right? Like somewhat recently.
I was just gonna say, yeah, this is a band I overlooked for years, dude. I had never really listened to any of their stuff. I saw him live, I think twice before I really got into their discography, and I was missing out, dude. This band is just fucking ridiculous. This album in particular is just amazing. Yeah, Einer's vocals are stellar, and they soar over top of everything else. Like it's such an interesting placement in the mix for a band like this because like. It's heavy sometimes, other times it's just very melodic, and I know it's always sort of driving. It's very rhythmic.
Another thing about Leprous that's unique, and I think Cole is really, again, where they really kick it off, and they continue it onward on The Congregation and Melina and forward, is like Leprous's music is fairly repetitive, which is uncommon in progressive metal and probably progressive rock generally. Like, there are a lot of repetitive grooves. They're not even grooves. Leprous is hard to describe, honestly. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of just, like, repetitive riffs, building atmosphere, long, just, like, kind of not even meditative because it's very rhythmic, but just, like, these long, like, there's a lot of space and a lot of time spent just, like, building on an idea and a motif. That's all over this album and all over The Congregation and Melina. Whereas like a lot of, especially progressive metal, is like very interested in like constant changes, constant switching, technically difficult changes in time signature or key or whatnot. And that's not really the case with Leprous, and I think that's another thing. But it is definitely progressive metal. Like Cole is that. That's the genre that this is. But it stands out for, and I think like that repetitive quality to a lot of the songs, especially the longer songs like The Valley.
Yeah.
I think that's like, if I were to really try to like enumerate what makes this band unique, that would be part of it.
What's interesting too is that there's definitely a technical aspect to them, but it's more to do with the rhythmic subdivisions. It's not like a bunch of wild displays of scale performances. Not to diminish the more technical bands on this list, but they get really really weird with the rhythms but they're more like motifs, like you said. Like it's these long repetitive sections where they're just kind of grinding these these kind of fucked up rhythmic parts into you, but it works out and it's smooth. It's not jarring, even though it's pretty complicated.
The chord progressions are really weird too, but they're subtly done, so you don't know. Like they work really well in the atmosphere, but I'm just thinking of like that like driving part, in the middle of the valley where it just repeats like over and over again, or even like
with piano. That bass line, with that real heavy bass line, the ambient section. I know exactly.
Or like the chord progressions on Chronic, like you get the piano, like that's a really weird chord progression that's going on, but it's really subtle and you don't think about it like, oh, it's not jarring in any way, which is I think pretty cool.
I recall reading a distinction once. I think it was like from some rando on the Prog Archives forums, and I read it back when I was like in high school, and it was very influential for me because it's not really what you think about when you're like a Dream Theater 16-year-old beard kid. Is that like you can have like technically complex music, like music that is complex in terms of performance, but you can also have music that's complex in terms of composition. And I think Leprous is a band that is the complexity primarily is in the composition. Like this stuff, I mean, it would take a while to like learn the rhythms because they're off and like they're not like trivial rhythms to learn on the drum kit or anything. But like compared to, your Dream Theaters, your Peripheries, you could probably like learn these songs a lot easier than you could those bands. But compositionally, I would say it's pretty complicated.
It's one of these things. I feel like the music, once you get the pattern or like rhythms down in the songs, you can kind of predict where they're gonna go. But there's no way, not many people in the world could write this kind of music. It's like what you said. Like it might be easier to play some of this stuff than one of Petrucci's solos or like improv over those sections or something like that. But I don't think many people like. I would have a hard time. Not that Petrucci could play this stuff and maybe write this stuff, but it would be such a departure from what he's doing to write something like The Valley or.
I do not think Petrucci could write this stuff. Leprous might not be able to write the stuff Petrucci writes either, but I do not think John Petrucci could write an album like this. I think if he attempted, it would sound like shit.
Possibly, it's really
different unique. Artists have different skills, so I'm not shitting on anyone, but I do think.
Yeah, I'm sure they would all say the same thing. And another example of this, if you want a good visual to go along with what we're saying, from their, I guess, well, not their most recent album, the one before that, from Pitfalls, the closer, The Sky is Red, which is probably one of my favorite songs ever, I would say. That song is just absolutely incredible. Probably, if I had to make a list, it would be somewhere near the top. That is one of my favorite songs ever. But there's a drum playthrough with the, Bart Kolstad is not on this album, but he's the current drummer, and just some of those, like you mentioned, James, the rhythmic like subdivisions, and you watch him play, it is really repetitive, but like I don't know, it'd be so easy to mess that up, and just like the way the creativity that goes into creating those like heavily like driving like percussive sounds. That's a good video to watch if you want to find that on YouTube. I would recommend watching that. It's like a visual accompaniment to what we're talking about. It's really interesting to see.
Yeah, Leprous live is quite an event to see. Just like pure stamina. Pure stamina when you see this band live.
The dude like breaks like 3 or 4 pairs of drumsticks. He's like hitting so hard, and he's got this like his pinky's off of the, like I don't even know how he holds the stick and like gets that sound. It's like so weird, and he breaks tons of drumsticks. I don't know if he's doing that live, but I mean I get tired watching him play that. That's really difficult.
When I saw them live,
the dude is unreal.
I saw them live in Austin. When was it? November 2018, and it was like a bizarrely cold day. Like it was like vastly colder than it usually ever gets there. It was like probably like 35 degrees, and it was an outdoor show. And I forget it. What's the drummer's name?
Bart Kolstad.
Yeah, he was like shirtless with shorts on. He had like nothing but a pair of shorts on. This dude. And like he did not give a fuck.
He's from Norway.
Yeah.
He's from Norway. That's shorts weather.
Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I can take my shirt off. It's a brisk 20 degrees outside.
They're a very visual band live too. Like the visual aspect of their live show is as much a show as the music itself.
Yeah, Einar is like a really interesting frontman to watch. Like he has like an undeniable presence and like he's very authoritative on the stage. He's not like he's not like going crazy or anything in an obnoxious way, but he's just like he's such an authority on the stage. And obviously like he's such a great singer that just like and he pulls it off 110% live. So like when you have a voice that insane, then yeah, you're going to command attention, and he definitely does live.
I feel like Leprous, and this is not to take anything away from the other bands because I love them in their own unique ways, but I feel like Leprous, like Sum Total, is just a piece of art. Like that's what it is. It's visually, like sonically, it's just a piece of art. That's kind of what I don't know how to describe it other than that.
Yeah, they're a unique thing. Like they are progressive metal. That's the genre they are. Like no other genre
anymore.
Really
I wouldn't
fits.
say that. These latest two albums, I'm not so sure they are metal anymore, which is totally fine. The last two albums are great.
Yeah, it's not really metal. It's like art rock, but art rock is one of those like famously like non-descriptive genres that people like. If no one can think of what the genre is, they call it art rock, which I think might be why people call Leprous art rock, because they're like. I know that Jake, you even though Leprous and Bentley obviously they don't sound exactly the same or anything, but I think that like of like extremely unique original progressive bands to emerge in the 2010s, the two I would have to point to would be Leprous and Bentley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with that. Although there's if anyone gets hooked on this sound and just wears out Leprous, another band I would recommend in the vein of this. I prefer Leprous, but there's a band from Iceland called Agent Fresco. Vocally very similar. They had those kind of like punchy guitar riffs, but the sound's much lighter and has much more pop sensibility. There's the album Destrier, which I think is an incredible. You can't see the air quotes art rock album to come out from Scandinavia. I would recommend if you're looking for other stuff. And like I said, this was just a gateway to finding some really cool quote unquote art rock stuff from Scandinavia and elsewhere. But yeah, have you guys heard Agent Fresco before?
No, I've never heard of them
I
actually.
haven't.
That sounds really promising though.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. It's really good stuff. They won some awards in Iceland for like best, I don't know, pop rock or something like that. So I would compare that album Destrier, the closest would be to Melina, which is that album's quickly becoming one of my favorite. Not that I ever hated Melina, but like on subsequent listens they've moved. That's another transitional album I think between the Congregation and what they're doing on Pitfalls. And I don't know, there's something about like the transitional albums with Leprous that I really gravitate to. Like just like the mixing of those sounds is really interesting. Just the way they're able to do that.
Melina is incredible.
Yeah, that's
like,
a great
album. I would put it on like Cole, the Congregation, and Melina would be my three favorites, and I think they're all on par with each other.
Anthony, was Bentley with that at that show in Austin in 2018?
They were. It was Bentley, Leprous, and Haken.
Yeah, I saw that tour also, but Bentley didn't make it to Denver. Their fucking bus got stuck in the mountains on the way down.
Classic.
To Denver. Yeah.
Oof. We saw them in Denver.
So the show got pushed back by like 2 hours. Yeah.
That was before
Lost
that.
Lake.
That would have been before that tour
Mm-hmm.
with Haken.
Yeah, it would have been like 6 months earlier. Same year though.
Yeah.
Yeah, they played at Lost Lake, where I've played now many times.
Nice.
Oh, you got Cape Horus played there? I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, we've played Lost Lake a bunch of times.
Yeah, another recommendation. They're not metal, but another great 2010s band, as Anthony mentioned, is Bentley. Pick any album you want if you like this kind of like offbeat, kind of like weird, unique millennial artsy stuff. Then that's Bentley's a band.
The newest one seems to be kind of polarizing.
I love it.
Frosting.
It's like hyper pop and really weird, but it's also really that's like an impenetrable album too. It's like a really challenging record, I think. even though it has those obvious like hyper pop.
I wouldn't listen to that one first. If I was telling somebody to get into Bentley, that's not the one I would send them to first. I like it a lot too.
I'd say Shiny Eyed Babies or maybe Land Animal is the first one.
Yeah, I'd say Land Animal. Land Animal's awesome. I liked what's the one from 2019 too?
You know what they mean. We are. I think
you know
what they mean.
You know who we are.
Yes.
You know what they mean.
Yeah, it's you know what.
You know who we are is. I don't know. That's another. Yeah, I don't know who. That's an album, but I don't know who that's from. You know what they mean. I described that album, James. I described that as a game changer because those are. I don't know if that was your second favorite album from that year, but it was for me. It was Empath, and then that one. I was like, those are just like a tier above. Because 2019. James and I like to reminisce about that year. There were a lot of good albums that came out in 2019.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Yeah. And then we had the 2020, which was other like externalities came into play and prevented some bands from releasing stuff. I think we've gotten back on track, but yeah, 2019 will forever be one of my favorite years in music. What
happened in 2020? What are you talking about?
I don't know. I've lost that year. I've committed it to memory and then trashed it. I don't want to talk about it.
Well, let's move on here. Another 20. This is 2013.
This came out a week later. Yeah.
Yeah, so Altered State by TesseracT. A solid 0.5 out of 5.
Yeah, we put this on the list.
I think Tone would agree here.
Yeah, we put this on the list basically as a huge meme just to like be funny. So we'll just rip on it for a few minutes and then move on.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. It really does compared to all this other stuff.
If in case we haven't mentioned it in a previous episode, I believe this is Jake's #1 album all time.
Yeah, I love this album. I love this album. It's really good. I don't know. I think Anthony mentioned in a previous episode. He said, and maybe this was more for like emotional reasons, but like he mentioned how like I think it was Marbles. He said by Marillion. He said this is one of my favorite albums of all time. It's actually kind of difficult to talk about, and I was like, or easy to talk about. But now I think about it, I can't like. I don't know. I feel like I would be preaching gospel and trying to talk about this album. Like to me, it makes that much of an impact on me. There's something about it. Like it's highly rhythmic and like there's like a primal sensual quality to it. I think, and so it's got to me. I don't know. The guitar sound is like big, but it's punchy and bass heavy. You get these really trance-like rhythm sections, and then of course like the guitars will be playing all these atmospheric, like really spacey kind of riffs with a lot of atmosphere, and then of course the vocals of Ash O'Hare are like angelic, seraphic almost. I don't know, just like the way that I don't know, the composition is so incredibly tight. The album flows really well. Yeah, this is an album I can close my eyes and just be lifted somewhere else. It's just everything I want out of music. Just great atmosphere, really nice rhythm, and I don't know. It's really, I don't know. It's like sentimental almost. Yeah, I don't know. I absolutely love this album.
Yeah, I mean, I
also love this album. I hadn't listened to it too much until a couple of years ago when Jake mentioned it at one point, and I've gotten a bunch of plays out of this since. It really is just phenomenal, and it's the atmospheric quality that makes it so interesting. It's a fucking gigantic sound. There's so much space.
For sure. Yeah, and I think it's true that music that like you really, really, really love is but often hard to talk about. Just because like if you love like a piece of art to like a certain level, then it's like very, very emotional for you, obviously. How like the connection you have to it, and like attempting to verbalize that often feels like kind of cheap.
Yeah.
So I think it's fine.
Not doing it justice.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we're doing a podcast where we're talking about music, so it's kind of ironic to say this, but like you can't fully use words to describe but music, which is a non-verbal art form, and like words are never going to fully do it justice. And if it's something that you like really, really love a lot, then their words aren't even going to come close. So I feel that.
Yeah, I mean, even just saying like great rhythm, like I just don't. I feel like I can't pin down exactly why I like. I mean, I probably can't. Like it might be impossible to do so. But I will point to it's the perfect example of this. Well, there's a couple tracks where they do this. So the one that gets heavy plays from me is Palingenesis, which is like the 2.5 minute track, and it just starts out with it's a really like simple track. It's near the end of the album. It's a really simple track, and I think compositionally it amazes me. So it starts out with this, like, I guess in a 4/4, but then like the bass and guitar are playing the same riff, and it's just really repetitive. And then the guitar like deviates from the bass and starts playing like a 5/4, I think. And then they just resolve it, and it comes back, and it kind of oscillates through the song. And they do that in a lot of places where they just have like this, it's almost like this dissonance, and they just, with the way they resolve the tension through these long rhythmic runs, with Ash singing over top of it, I don't know, like that just really appeals to me, I think. Yeah, they're really good at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, this is an album that is like way above, like, I sort of mentioned this before, but this was a sound that was trendy within the genre in the past decade. And so there are a lot of bands who are performing similar kind of stuff to this TesseracT album. But this stands above and apart from all that stuff by a large degree. And yeah, maybe it is like you could boil it down to small little unique turns like the one Jake just described. But yeah, this album is great. I haven't spent that much time with it. I hadn't even heard it until a few months ago when Jake made me listen to it as well. But it's definitely the most ambient of these albums. Like sort of ambient spaciness is kind of part of gent in general. This album leans hard on that side of gent, which I like, and kind of performs that ambient spacey quality of gent music. Like, this is that part of the genre, like, done to perfection.
I totally agree, and honestly, I think it's kind of essential to good gent music. There needs to be that spacey quality to it, otherwise it can get pretty boring pretty fast.
I mean, a lot of the riffs are atonal, so it's, yeah. I mean, you got to do something interesting with it. Or Meshuggah does a great job of that. A lot of their stuff is atonal, but they do a great job of building the atmosphere. I mean, a lot of this stuff is brain melting too. Like, if you're trying to follow along with the patterns, you can lose it kind of easily and stuff. But it's really subtle, and that's why I like it. Like maybe one of my favorite moments in music is, you guys might remember the part on Exile. It starts out with that like really like characteristic gent intro, and then Ash kind of starts singing, and then it breaks and it has the instrumental, and it's just that like spacey guitar playing, and then they start doing the palm muted riffs, and then the bass is playing underneath of it, and then that's another part where like the bass and the guitar kind of meld, and it just gives you this long run. And yeah, to me it's almost religious. I don't know how else to describe it. I absolutely love this stuff. And you know what's funny about it is, you know, even though I obviously recognize Tool is an excellent band, they tend not to be one of my favorites, but like but I think there's a quality of what Tool is doing in this, like that really kind of like spiritual, like rhythmic kind of interesting stuff. I don't know, not that like I wouldn't compare those two. I wouldn't say like these are too obvious, but like there's something similar in what I'm trying to describe, I think, between those two bands.
Gent is hugely indebted to Tool. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Like, progressive music of the past 25 years is a huge amount of it is indebted to Tool, but gent definitely is. I feel like people don't make that observation very often, but it's kind of obvious, at least to my ears.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think Lateralis to me is like a lot of people get out of Lateralis. I get out of this album. For me, I guess the difference is, one, I like that high pitch, like high register vocal that we talked about that with, like, you know, Thank You Scientist is an example. We did the Dance Gavin Dance. Like, I love that vocal style, so that's one thing. And then I just love the palm, like the sound of the palm muted riffs. I think that's really cool. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's other than that, I don't really know what the difference is, other than it's a qualitative one that I can't really describe. But this album, I credit this, along with a couple others, Periphery 1 and 2, Intrinsic by the Contortionist and this, I would say, opened up an entire world of music to me that I didn't know. Like, I was listening to like just pretty standard metalcore stuff, and then I was like, oh shit, you can do metalcore and it can be really interesting compositionally, and it can be technical. It doesn't have to be technical, but it can be. It can be kind of weird, like off, like I said, offbeat with bent knee, like that, like just any kind of music that comes after that. It was a palate cleanser, but then it also built up a tolerance to like a lot of other weirder music that I didn't know was out there. So I have obviously have like a huge emotional, like nostalgic connection to these albums, but I also come back and listen to them like hundreds of times. So like there's staying power with me with these two. It's not just like, oh, I remembered listening to these at a good time in my life or anything like that. I think this was a gateway. These albums were a lot. The four that I mentioned were kind of gateway albums for me.
Yeah, it's that confluence of the music itself, of course, combined with the context of one's life when they get into it, the feelings that someone associates with it from that time. It's like that and 1,000 other things. It's the confluence of all those things that like make an album really make like an album's one of your favorites. Like whenever anyone points to like one of their top tens, there's that huge different sequence of factors that play into it. Extra musical factors. I think it's unavoidable. We talked a little bit about that last week too.
Yeah, it's a matrix of all sorts of like information that comes to play, like to bear on the album that can affect how you hear something. And that is an argument I think in favor of giving things multiple shots. Like if you don't like something the first time, trying over and over. Well, I mean not over and over, but trying as many times as you're comfortable with, and trying to like understand what you're listening to, because sometimes something will just click and you won't know exactly why, but it will click, and you might be able to look back on it later and go, oh, I missed this part of it the first time I listened to it or something. But there are also just albums like this that I was just like, holy shit, I've never heard anything like this. Like, I don't know, something with the composition's so tight and interesting, and technically proficient, even though it's not super flashy. Like the music's not super flashy. And it's funny, one common complaint about this album, and really the gent scene in general, is like, again, here I am describing the music in terms of its fan base, but again, here's this, like, I think there's a quality in this kind of music where it's like, I was getting into this music at around the same time that I was getting interested in philosophy, like that ended up being my educational path, and this album that has like the really abstract kind of lyrics, and I don't know, has the spacey themes in the sound, and I was getting really interested in like physics and astronomy and philosophy at the time, so I associate it with that. But I think that does attract people who are interested in that stuff, and people say it's kind of superficial in that way, and people criticize the album on that front. But I don't really think that's the case. I listen to the lyrics, and I don't really know that they're that abstract, but there is an element of that in them, in Ash's lyrics.
Same stereotype
with a name like TesseracT.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's TesseracT.
Yeah.
Any genre of music, or really any art form, is going to have a set of stereotypes attached to the people who like it. It's unavoidable too. So
yeah, that's just how it goes. And weirdly enough, so I like TesseracT's discography. They only have 4 studio albums. So there's the first one was 1, and of course it had Daniel Tompkins, another fantastic vocalist, and then he came back on Polaris, which was the follow-up to this album, and then Sonder, which is their most recent album. I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018. I'm guessing we're going to get a new album from them. They've been doing other stuff. They've been releasing like remixes and live albums and things like that. But this album, to me, I would put it like, there's more distance between this album and the other albums in this discography than there are between any album and any other albums in another, like, of the discographies of the bands we're talking about today, if that makes sense. Like, this album is way ahead of Sonder, Polaris, and 1 for me. Even though I like those albums, then Periphery 2 is ahead of any other, or that, whatever.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, makes sense.
I haven't heard their other stuff. I've only heard this one.
I would like to get into all their material. Did you listen to their live album from last year? Looked like it probably
Portals?
was
Yeah,
pretty
it's really
promising.
It's really cool. Yeah, it's interesting to hear. I mean, of course, we hear Daniel Tompkins and all the stuff that he's been a part of, but then to hear his like take on Ash's vocal parts, And sometimes I listen to it. I just prefer. I remember when I prefer Ash as a vocalist, but I also think this music was like perfectly. This album was perfectly suited for him. I mean, obviously, I think there's that chemistry between a vocalist and a band and how they navigate that. And so there are moments where I'm like, yeah, I wish it was Ash doing it live, but it's still really interesting. It's a really good kind of live album they did, and it's all done on it's like a digital like studio event thing that they did and recorded it. It's like from a live concert they did. It's a really cool album. It's really long and there's a lot of material on it. They did a lot of their material.
Yeah, I need to get into this band's whole catalog because Altered State is definitely pretty phenomenal.
Polaris is one of the grooviest songs. Utopia from Polaris is one of the grooviest songs I've ever heard. I think you guys will like that track. And then the last little bit, I saw James looking at it earlier. Another crossover from this like 2010 stuff. He looked up Chris Barretto's name, who plays sax on 2 of the tracks on this.
I was gonna ask about the sax.
Yeah, on Calabi Yao, I don't know how to. That's some like manifold thing in topology. He plays the sax solo through most of that, and then he plays like the outro on Embers, which is the last track on the album. But yeah, Chris Barretto, who's the former vocalist of Periphery and also I guess now former vocalist of Monuments, who's another UK gent band, who I have a high opinion of.
This is not easy music to work in auxiliary instrumentation, like any kind of reed instrument into.
Yeah, and it works really well. The fact
that I'm pretty sure it's a tenor. The fact that they worked in the tenor like well on those moments is insanely impressive because it's not easy music to work in any kind of auxiliary instrumentation into. You don't hear it very often in this genre. So that really surprised me when I first heard this, and it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, there's some jazzy stuff going on in this album, but it's not obvious like when you listen to it until the introduction of the saxophone. And I don't think they use sax on any other album, as far as I know. It's like the only time. It's really unique touch. But yeah, I mean, Palingenesis and Calabayao, like, of course, it resolves into the riff that they were doing on Palingenesis, which I think is really cool. I don't know. This album just seems to me it was like written as like a holistic piece. It's basically it's four songs with multiple track breakdowns, and then but it just seems like it was written as like one thing, and I love albums like that.
Yeah, I mean, like it like the first how many tracks like are a suite explicitly, right? Isn't like more than half the tracks are a suite?
I think they. Yeah, so it's of matter, of mind, of reality, and of energy. Those are the tracks, and then the individual tracks are just I don't even know. Like they're just one song when I listen to them.
It definitely, I definitely perceived it that way when I first heard it. Yeah. Like I almost like I couldn't even really pay attention to the track changes because it pretty much is one large piece.
Maybe the most jarring would be from Nocturne to Exile. There's kind of a break there, but it's obvious on like the other 3. So of matter, it's obvious that it's like between Proxy and Retrospect, like that's obviously a transition there, and then Palingenesis and Calabayao, and then Singularity and Embers. I think there's an obvious transition between those. But yeah, fellas, I don't know what else to say about this album. It's probably my favorite album of all time. I keep ranking it up there every time I do these. It's like I don't know where else to put it. And I don't know. I listen to a fair bit of music, so I don't know. It's. I mean, I love like 2010s prog metal stuff, but I don't know. It's a good.
Well, this anonymous person on Rate Your Music has a really, really strong, well thought out opinion about it. But
let's not read it.
Maybe we should leave that out. Yeah, maybe we should leave that out.
Oh God,
I do not want to spend 20 minutes ranting about some rando on Rate Your Music. Let's move on, please.
Yeah, fuck you, James. Why'd you even mention it?
All right, moving right along here.
James dangling the bait. Jim dangling the bait in front of Jake, and then Tone, I have to step in and be a hero and pull that shit away.
Good times only in this episode. I'm not. This music is like, outside of the fans of this music, a lot of people hate this music, so I don't want to get into it.
A lot of people hate anything. It doesn't matter.
That's true.
There's got to be a range of opinion about literally anything. But my opinion about The Mountain by Haken is that it's fucking amazing. Maybe one could argue I'm not saying I'm going to argue it necessarily because I don't want Jake to hit the roof. But one could argue that The Mountain is perhaps the seminal progressive rock release of the 2010s.
I would say it's right up there.
I would agree. To me, Haken is like maybe until their later stuff, maybe the only band who's not in this kind of gent mold. To me, they were like starting with Aquarius, which came out in 2010, 2011, I want to say.
2010.
2010, yeah. So to me, they were much more in the vein of what Dream Theater is doing and had continued that. At least through Affinity, though you can kind of see some changes to their sound on Affinity, which is the follow-up LP to the Mountain. I would say, yeah, and I would say this is maybe more like grown-up prog metal compared to the other stuff, like compared to Periphery and Tesseract. Like, I don't know, it's like it's obviously like a lot of it's an homage to 70s symphonic prog, Gentle Giant and Genesis being some obvious influences on this album. So I don't know that I disagree with that observation, Anthony. I think one could argue that.
Where do you come in on this, Jim?
I was hoping for more controversy. There. I'm disappointed. No, I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right too. I mean,
like gun to my head, this is ridiculous metaphor, but gun to my head, someone asked me like, what is the most essential progressive album of that decade? I would have to choose this. I don't even necessarily know if I'd say it's my favorite, although it would definitely be in my top 10 progressive releases from the 2010s, without question. But I think it has to be the most essential. And it's not even the most original, but it's just like this is like The Mountain is this style of music done to perfection.
Yes.
It's my second time using the phrase done to perfection, but
It's also right at its time. Like, I don't think like there's obviously an older range of influences for this stuff, but this doesn't sound old. This music, it sounds right in its place in 2013.
Yes.
Does that make any
sense?
sense?
I think Haken's. Yeah, no, Haken's really. I think Haken's pretty unique. I mean, they're not just a Dream Theater like ripoff or anything like that, you know. But there's obviously influence. They're obviously influenced from the great 70s bands. But I definitely agree with you. It has a modern feel to it. I don't know. I couldn't point exactly what their other influences would be. And I think as we get into Haken's discography, with Vector and Virus, that becomes more like they're maybe one of the only bands on this list who got heavier. I think I would say Periphery didn't get heavier, I don't think, like I mentioned. Leprous got a bit softer. Tesseract is like with Sonder got a little bit softer. I think the next band definitely got softer, but Haken got heavier. They might be the only one of this group that did, and they went into that kind of like chaotic gent mold with their last two albums. But at this point, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's obvious they have the older influences, but it's still uniquely them, and I think it's a pretty modern take on that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the gent, I think, is starting to creep in on The Mountain relative to Aquarius and Visions. Like, Aquarius and Visions are, I like you said, very much more in the style of a band like Dream Theater. But then on The Mountain, you get Falling Back to Earth, which has some much gentler guitar sounds coming in relative to those previous two records.
Yeah, Falling Back to Earth is heavy as fuck. That was their heaviest song up to this point, without question. Drowning in the Flood's pretty heavy too, but Falling Back to Earth is, I would say, is probably heavier. One thing about the Haken, I think this actually falls away on Vector and Virus to the detriment of those albums, in my view. But the thing about Haken on The Mountain is that I think it's similar to Yes in the sense that the band is balanced perfectly. Like, no one member is shining out above the other ones, and that's very, very hard to do. There are very few bands that pull that off. Yes is always the band I think of that did on the classic Yes albums, And I think the Mountain also, Haken can also do that on the Mountain. Like, every single member is, like, fully shines at every moment, really.
I would say that's the same on Affinity too. Yeah. I would say on Affinity as well. Vector to me is a Henshaw thing. Like I feel like he's all over that thing. And Diego's influence is much less on Vector and Virus, which is I think hurts the albums a bit. Diego to me was the star of Affinity, but he was also, like you mentioned, I think he was really balanced on that, and on the Mountain with the rest of the group.
God, I love Diego's parts on the Mountain, dude. Like the piano bit in the intro to Atlas Stone.
Oh god, it's beautiful.
Just phenomenal. Yeah. Takes me away, man. Takes me away that piano bit. What's interesting about the Mountain too, and is like the interlude tracks. What are they? I guess As Death Embraces and The Path, the intro of The Path, and there's another one.
Somebody and Nobody are kind of. I kind of treat those as. I mean,
is it In Memoriam?
More fleshed out.
I think it's In Memoriam is the name of the song.
Yeah.
As Death Embraces is one of the best tracks on the whole album, and that's like a short ballad. I think As Death Embraces is probably Ross's finest work as a singer. Probably, if I had to pick.
Except on the Troika stuff, maybe. He does some great harmonies and stuff, or harmony work on that album.
No, he's really good. Ross is a great singer.
It's hard not to give it to Crystallized, but
yeah, true.
Yeah, it's hard not
so that's a great. So the Restoration EP, which I guess a lot of us we kind of put in the same vein as the LPs, right? I mean, Crystallized doing a lot of heavy lifting. Earthlings is a great track.
Those 3 tracks, dude. I mean, Crystallized is one of my favorite tracks of all time.
For sure.
But all 3 of those tracks on Restoration are badass.
You know, I think something about the Mountain and Restoration is that there's a timelessness to the music. Yes. It doesn't seem like an artifact from the time, and that's something interesting about these two records, I would say. Affinity, there is some of that like footprint, like you can feel it on like the Endless Knot, for example. It's like pretty like dub. There's like
I love that part and, like, on the Endless Knot. But that's a badass break.
Oh, I do too.
I love the Endless Knot. That's a cool. It is a badass track.
It does. It is reminiscent of the time, though.
True.
I see what you mean.
But I don't get that as much on the Mountain or Restoration. Maybe Darkest Light with like the riff. Maybe some of that, but like. Earthlings and Crystallized to me are pretty timeless feeling.
We got to talk about Cockroach King here too, man.
It's their signature song.
Oh yeah.
If there's any ones that is the signature song for Haken. Like if you want to introduce somebody to Haken, you send them to Cockroach King because you get a little bit of everything. You get the djenty heavy side. You get the 70s prog influence to the max. I mean, there's parts of that are like could have been on a Gentle Giant album.
The thing that always floors me,
the chanting and
the thing that always floors me about Cockroach King is that on paper, it should be a miserable failure, but it's the opposite. It's like a perfect song.
Yeah, it's a resounding success.
Yeah. Like not only is it a resounding success, it's like I would call it a perfect song, honestly, and like I wouldn't.
Yeah, yeah. I would too.
But conceptually, it should suck. Like, plenty of bands try to do stuff like that and just fall on their goddamn faces. But Haken are at another level, in my opinion.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, shit, I've seen Haken 3 times now. And, I mean, god damn can these boys play, too, man. Holy shit.
Speaking of Diego...
The playing is
a beast,
unbelievable.
Speaking of Diego's parts on the Mountain, that synth break on Cockroach King where, like, it basically sounds like a bug. Like, it was, like, kind of intentionally what they were going for.
Yeah.
That synth lead, like about probably, like, 6 minutes in, that sounds like a buzz flying, like a bug flying around you, is just, like, I don't know what he did to get that synth.
Flange effect.
Like, Diego it really sucks that he's not in the band anymore, because he pulls out so many creative sounds on the keyboards on the Mountain and on throughout the whole catalog. Like that moment on Nocturnal Conspiracy where it sounds like a duck, where he like has that synth noise that sounds like a duck quacking. I fucking love that. Like There's creative stuff like that all over the Haken catalog from
that
Diego.
section. I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
there.
What about the Latin part in the title track on Visions? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Part, that's one of my favorite parts in any Haken track. Like, that's really cool. And whatever he does on Lapse, which is one of my favorite moments, and maybe one of my favorite keyboard solos, like right before. I mean, that song's kind of just like I don't know. It sounds like a Phil Collins track at times, and then it like, I don't know, like the drums. It's got the atmosphere, and then it picks up, and then Diego comes in with that keyboard solo. It just hits all the right places, and then Henshaw comes in with the guitar solo. Really excellent. Well, but also as an addendum to what you said about Cockroach King, that is so much their main track that they wrote 2 follow-up albums to the story in the song. So
yeah, and they obliquely reference cockroaches in a bunch of their song titles now. Though they're probably going to keep doing that forever.
Yeah, well, and then they had the callback to it in the
Ectobius Rex,
the Messiah Complex. Yeah, they have like the callback to it.
Yeah, Ectobius Rex, which is just
literally
Latin
wrote 2
for
follow-up
Cockroach
albums
King.
to the song. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I love Vector and Virus. I really like those albums, but yeah, there is a noticeable lack of Diego on those albums. It's, to me, those are like Henshaw albums, and they're really similar to his solo record that came out around that time,
which kicks
Cocoon,
ass too. Cocoon,
which is really damn good. Except for the rapping part from Ben Levin, which is not my favorite.
What's the name of that album?
I think it's called Cocoon.
It's called Cocoon, isn't it?
Cocoon.
Yeah, that's a fucking kick-ass
which is
album.
it's another Bug reference.
Yeah, Haken, man, well, one of the best players in the game right now. I fucking love Haken.
There's no way that their future material,
on another album too.
There's no way that their future material won't suffer somewhat from Diego leaving. Like, I hope that that's not the case, but it's hard for me to imagine it not being the case. Diego is like a huge part of what makes Haken unique and awesome. So I'm really worried about him not being in the band anymore.
They have a new single coming out soon, Nightingale. They just put out like a call for artists to do art on the thing. So I think they're going to release a new single soon. I wouldn't be surprised within the next month, a couple weeks maybe. I'm excited.
Don't get me wrong, but it is very unfortunate that Diego's
it will
not
probably
be
be really, really good. Yeah. It will probably be really, really good. And my enjoyment of Vector and Virus is I do miss that aspect of it, but it's not heavily impacted. I really enjoy those records, so I have high hopes for it. But I feel you on that.
I just noticed this dude pushing the rock up the hill.
Really?
Really?
I'd never seen him on there before. Yeah.
The Mountain is also a good example of a concept album that's not a rock opera. Like, those two things are different. People use the terms interchangeably for some reason. Rock opera tends to be terrible.
There's a big old difference.
But the Mountain...
There's a big difference.
The Mountain is definitely a concept album.
Transitist is pretty good. You threw that one out there, so I had to say the word transitist in this episode.
Well,
is there good rock opera besides Tommy?
Yeah, if you're not Pete Townsend, probably you can't write a good rock opera.
Yeah.
Tommy and Quadrophenia is basically
I think that's a pretty good maxim.
The Wall is good.
It's good despite
it's not
being
my favorite,
rock opera.
but it's good.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And it's not that good.
I'm with you. That might piss people off, but it's not my favorite.
It's far from my favorite. I think that's like the beginning of the end.
Oh, The War of the Worlds by Jeff Wayne. Yeah. That's good rock opera too.
Oh yeah,
I've never heard that. Yeah, you guys have been talking about that lately. I'm gonna check that out.
That's essential.
What else? The Astonishing.
Who's Jeff Wayne? Had he been in another band before?
No, he's like Jeff Wayne. Basically, like, made his bones both before and after the War of the Worlds. Like, kind of being like a session composer, basically. Like, compose a lot of like commercial, like, music for commercials and whatever. Like one of those kind of dudes.
Gotcha.
But he just happened to make that one album that was a huge hit.
I have to think about it more. There might be a rock opera album that's really good that I'm not thinking of right now. Our faithful listeners can tell us in the comments. Like and subscribe down below.
Tell us your favorite Arion album down below.
Yeah. Oh god.
All right, moving on to the next band, which is Arion.
Okay. Yeah. Moving on to the next band, which is the Contortionist with their 2014 album Language. Another one I've discovered pretty recently. I discovered this in early 2020 in preparation for a concert I was very excited for that I didn't get to go see, and that I'm still very salty about not seeing. Yeah, I know you did.
Fucker.
Fuck.
I tried to get James to listen to this for like 6 years, and he just wouldn't do it.
Based.
Like one of the first times I met him.
Why would I listen to you?
Based.
You ended up listening to me, and I was right. So
you ended up listening to
it was good in spite of your recommendation. Yeah,
that's
probably
good.
True. It was good despite your recommendation.
I was right this time. You have to give me that. But no, I wore this album out. So as I mentioned earlier, Intrinsic by the Contortionist was one of these albums that was just a gateway to a lot of other. And then of course Exoplanet. And the cool thing about the Contortionist is they started out as like just a straight deathcore band. I mean, there's progressive elements in it. In Exoplanet, I love Exoplanet, because I love deathcore, and I think it's a really unique deathcore record. But then they start softening up and coming up with more interesting, complex compositions, in my opinion, like and guitar work. Well, just instrumentally, I think they get better on Intrinsic, and that's probably my favorite, the Contortionist album. But I wore this thing out when it came out. I mean, this is like, if you when you become a philosophy student, you get interested in Eastern philosophy. Like, this is the album you want to like listen to for like to accompany those kinds of like spasms you have in that kind of like interest. Totally. And I mean, Alan Watts at the end.
I'm so tired of Alan Watts samples. I'm so sick of Alan Watts samples. They're so overdone. Fuck Alan Watts samples on albums. I like this album. Language is awesome.
Where else do we get Alan Watts samples?
But when I was listening to this for the first time, and then the fucking Alan Watts came on at the end, I was like, "Are you fucking serious? This is the most cliche shit ever." Sampling him.
Were people doing that before this?
Yeah, it's all over everything.
Yeah, what else has an Alan Watts sample on it?
I don't know all over everything. Example. I don't know a single example.
I don't have receipts for this rant.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
I'm not going to claim that I have receipts for this
Motherfucker doesn't bring receipts. He doesn't bring receipts.
But I'm tired of Alan Watts. I'm tired of him. Quit sampling him.
I never heard anything like that before. I like Alan Watts. I'd never heard anything like it before.
I don't have a problem with him like as a thinker. I don't have a problem with Alan Watts like as a person, but I do think I am kind of annoyed with him being sampled.
He is. I mean, he's a pop philosopher, or was a pop philosopher. So and he said some pretty cool shit, and popularized Zen Buddhism and those ideas. Was instrumental in that. So it doesn't surprise me that other people had done that. I don't know, I don't know of any other examples, but I had not heard anything like that before at the time. But it doesn't ruin the track for me. I have a positive association with it. If I hear it in other stuff, maybe I'll judge it negatively. But that might be that part in the end of the parable might be impervious to that. In any case, yeah, I wore the hell out of this album. I was waiting for it for 2 years, like Intrinsic. I was just because Jonathan Carpenter, who was the previous vocalist who was on Exoplanet and on Intrinsic, left, and then we get Mike Lassard from Last Chance to Reason, who's another great band that I love, another really interesting 2010s prog metal group, and I think they might be coming out with an album soon, which would be sick. But that was another one of these, like, Tillian joining Dance Gavin Dance, Mike Lassard joining the Contortionist is just hype as fuck when that was announced. Like, that was one of those cool crossover things that I was really excited about. And I think he helped maybe take their music to another level. I mean, another parts of it is they started doing this kind of, like, cynic... I'm going to mess the album titles up again. Carbon-Based Anatomy and Traced in Air?
Yes.
I mess the album titles up every time I talk about it. Yes, they do their take on that style of progressive metal, I would say, on this album and in the follow-up, Clairvoyant. Though more so maybe on this. Clairvoyant is the more I listen to it, the more I see differences between it and Language, I think.
Yeah, Language is
yeah, I mean, the most obvious difference is the lack of harsh vocals on Clairvoyant.
But also compositionally.
There are differences in composition. I agree.
It's not as like this album's a little more noodly on the guitar. Like there's I don't know. There's I think a pretty.
It's just heavier. It's just heavier.
I used to say this was 1A and 1B with Clairvoyant, and they're obviously much more similar than the other two, but I think those two albums are pretty different the more I listen to them.
They definitely continue to lean into like the psychedelic tinge on Language on Clairvoyant, but it loses a lot of the heaviness. I mean that's what I love about Language though, is like a lot of it is like almost fusion. Like it's like Cynic in that regard. Like so much of it is like fusion guitar parts and big wide open spaces. Like a lot of jazz drumming too. Some of the drumming is ridiculous on this album. Lots of good cymbal work that just washes out over the rest of the music. Makes it very very cool.
Yeah, Language is similar to Cynic in the sense that, like, I think Language is an awesome album. So this isn't a negative. Language is like one of those progressive metal albums that's like borderline not metal in the same way that Cynic is borderline not metal. While still maintaining like a loose shell of a metal framework. I
agree.
Like Language, I can't speak to their other material, but Language it's metal kind of. It has the trappings, but it's not 100% a metal record. And same with Trace to Near by Cynic. Like, it is metal, but not fully.
Yeah, one of the tags here on Rate Your Music is post-metal, which would make sense, using the metal framework to make something different.
I mean, there's obvious metal parts, like on Language 2 and on Ebb and Flow, like the heavy vocals and stuff, or the harsh vocals and like their heavy guitar riffs.
Dude,
and there's still some of that on Clairvoyant, but much less.
There's one part too that's super fucking heavy on Language. It's in Thrive when they build up this tremolo picked part, and then he lets out this big fucking pinch harmonic, and they kind of stop for a second, and then slam in with the double bass and 7/8. It's just it's fucking phenomenal, man. Gets me every time. I love that shit.
And Lassard does really cool vocal layering, like his harmonies and stuff. So there's actually a video of him somewhere on YouTube when he's doing vocals for Level 2 by Last Chance to Reason, and like just the way he like layers his harmonies and stuff. And then of course he'll layer the harsh vocals in, but turn them down in the mix, and it gives this really cool resonance. Because it'll just mirror or just it will just follow along with what he's doing at the clean song parts. And I think that adds a really cool layer to the vocals. And of course you can see this was engineered by Jamie King, who I think produced all of the Between the Buried and Me records, which I think that's an obvious influence on the Contortionist. It's an obvious influence on Last Chance to Reason, and I think Mike brings that into some of this, like just some of the vocal stuff. But he's not a super similar vocalist to Tommy or anything like that. But I think there's some crossover there. Also, I have to mention, you guys know this part in Language 2. This used to freak me out. So, funny story. I went to community college for 2 years, and then I went to university as a junior. And my first college apartment was being renovated, and they had to put us up in a hotel for like a month because I had nowhere to live. And this album had come out like right around that time, so I was like in some Holiday Inn or something, like Marriott something, listening to this album all the time. And there's this part. I mean, it's like by myself in a hotel in a city I've never been to before, you know. It's just like kind of weird. And there's this part. There's like a meme online where people will add like someone knocking on the door in the background to freak you out. And there's this part in Language 2 that sounds like someone's knocking on a door. And I'm like, was that messed up in the studio? Like, what is that sound? You guys know what I'm talking about?
I don't recall.
It bothers the hell out of me.
No. I don't.
In no comments I ever see about it, nobody ever mentions it. So I don't. It freaks me out though, and I'll listen to it, and sometimes I'm like, "What the fuck?" Like it'll.
I think it's just because you're a paranoid motherfucker. I think that's the primary.
No, I promise you. Yes, but I promise you that's really a really weird. Like I don't know what happened in the mix. I will find the part and send it to you all, but other people might know what I'm talking about. It's almost like something made it through that wasn't supposed to make it through in that track.
That does happen sometimes. Like there are mistakes on professionally released albums sometimes. I'll have to listen to it again with that in mind.
I'll send you the timestamp once we're done here.
Yeah, please do. I don't recall that at all.
That's like whenever an album has like a sample of a car horn on it, and you're driving and you hear that and you always freak out.
Yeah.
I think we've all had that experience.
But I was in this hotel and I didn't know anybody, and I was in a town I had never been to, and I was like getting ready to go on this campus, which was like the biggest place I'd ever been because I'm from a small town. And so I don't know, I was just like my nerves were like, so I was listening to this album, it was really chill, but there's that one part in there and it always fucked with me. I just thought I'd mention that. And another thing about it, if you've ever seen me in person at least twice, you will have seen me wearing my pullover with or my sweatshirt of this album. I wear that shit everywhere.
Have you seen Contortionist live?
In general, for any band X, have I seen them live? The answer is no.
So I'm the only one of the three of us who's seen Contortionist live, and I definitely know them the least well of the three of us. Isn't that fucked up? Jim is just fucking seething. Jim is just...
Oh my god, if you only knew.
Jim is just...
If you only knew.
Jim is
just how angry I still am about this 2 years later.
Big jar of
I've never been in an area where... I've never been in an area where I can listen to a lot of live music, and I didn't have a lot of friends who listened to this kind of music to like go to, so it would just be like, when I was younger, I was like, I just couldn't drive 3 hours by myself.
Yeah, it's a fucking haul to DC from Lexington, right?
Yeah.
Charlotte's
all of that,
right?
Richmond, which was 2 hours. Charlotte's about the same from where I was. Norfolk or Virginia Beach was also another place. And so now that I'm in a bigger area, but then the everything's shut down, so it was like, I got messed up on that, but what are you gonna do?
Well, that about wraps up the 2010s Prog Metal Starter Pack. Do you guys want to rank these things and do some honorable mentions?
Yeah, let's rank them.
Yeah. These are hard to rank.
I've got mine if y'all want.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. 5 to 1. Why am I blanking?
It's going to be Species Spicy.
Hold on. No, it's not.
It's not?
No, it's totally not.
I think it's really hard to be Species Spicy with these albums.
Yeah, it's not. 5 to 1. And I'm not memeing on you here, Jake.
No, I already know you guys don't like the most.
Altered State, Periphery 2, Language, Coal, The Mountain.
And honorable mention?
Oh, honorable mention, yeah. I would go with Spiritual Migration by Persephone.
You bastard, you said you weren't going to do
Prog
that.
Metal band. Well, I was going to say The Most Pedestrian Cheeseburger by K-Pora, but I don't want anyone to ever fucking listen to that, so...
I've listened to that maybe 30 times, I would say.
God help you.
I love Celtic disco. Yeah, it's a good track. Anyway, yeah, Spiritual Migration. That's a great pick. Persephone's awesome.
Yeah, that's a sick album.
All right, Big Jake, let's hear him.
All right. I'm not memeing on you here, Jimbo. But 5 to 1, I'll go with The Mountain.
That is
Periphery 2. Language. Coal. Altered State.
That is 9 Scoville spicy hot ranking right there.
The only one that's kind of spicy would be The Mountain.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's...
The other ones are... If you know my music taste, like...
That's massive Scovilles. Putting that as 5.
I think I have all these.
Isn't The Mountain like one of your lowest ranked Haken albums?
Let's not get into that.
It might be.
So my ranking is...
Fair enough.
Hold on. Honorable mention.
Okay.
I would pick The Joy of Motion by Animals as Leaders. I'm a complete fan of Animals as Leaders. I love them. That's a really jazzy
and that's
release.
That's like just shy of essential for 2010's prog metal, if not essential.
Yeah, that could have made it onto this.
That easily
list.
could have been.
I'm not in love with that album,
but it has
honestly.
the Misha influence, so
I'm not really that huge of a fan of that album,
Motion.
but it could make the list definitely. My ranking would be 5 to 1. 5 is Periphery 2. 4 would be Language. 3 would be Altered State. 2 would be... 1 and 2 are interchangeable, but I'd say that 2 would be Coal and 1 would be The Mountain.
Got an honorable mention there?
My honorable mention would be Portal of Eye by Nea Obliviscaris, which also could make the list.
Yes.
I listened to that again today for the first time in a couple years, and that album is an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, that album is fucking awesome.
It is amazing. Yeah.
It's too bad that band like kind of fell apart with a bunch of drama, but a lot of people talk about
Really?
that now when they talk about Portal of I. It's just like, fucking set aside the personal lives of the members and just listen to the music. It's like, it's
I don't know
essential.
about
I don't even know what you're talking about.
One of the members had like some like domestic
I'm
abuse
lucky
incident or
not to.
something.
Oh, was this before or after Citadel? That was in 2014.
It was after Citadel. It might have been before the third one. I'm not an expert on this shit though. But like, if you go to any fucking forum about Enable of the Scars, it's going to be a bunch of people talking about that because people latch, not to like downplay any crime that was occurred, but like people tend to latch on to extra musical drama, so you're going to see stuff about it. But Portal of I is definitely a masterpiece.
One last thought too. I think it's worth mentioning. A lot of the big flagship prog metal bands still made some fucking incredible shit in the 2010s. Like Opeth didn't skip a beat in the 2010s. Jake and I talked about this all the time. Devin Townsend put out our favorite album in the 2010s.
Do I need to say it first?
IQ.
Oh God, come on now.
What?
Come on now, don't do it.
Do we know what else came out in the 2010s?
He's gonna do it. See, he's doing it. He's doing it.
Oh, I
Jake.
Yeah, Transitus. No, that's 2020.
Jake, what else came out in the What else came out in the 2010s from a big name progressive metal band? What else? I'm curious.
You want me to do the thing, or are you genuinely asking me?
I don't know.
Volition by Protest the Hero was highly regarded.
That's all right.
I think one of us is the Killer by Dillinger Escape Plan kind of gets lumped into this.
Unironically, though, I was doing a meme about Dream Theater. Dream Theater had a rough 2010s. They had a rough time in the 2010s, unfortunately. But Opeth certainly didn't. 2010s Opeth, not everyone loves.
Kind of opposite trajectories in the 2010s for those two bands.
Yeah, not everyone loves
Opeth
2010s
like
Opeth.
totally broke the mold. Yeah, a lot of people bitch about it. A lot of people bitch about it, but those people are Philistines. 2010s Opeth is fucking awesome.
The real good stuff from the 2010s. Yeah. Veil of Imagination by Wilderun's another good one.
That's a good one.
Trying to think. In the Passing Light of Day by Pain of Salvation. I noticed Anthony does not like that album as much as I do, but I really like that album.
I don't love it.
Oh, I really, really like In the Passing Light of Day. Panther, that Panther was 2020. But Panther, I don't think is all that great. In the Passing Light of Day, I actually really love. I think it's Jim who doesn't really like it.
I like it. It doesn't do nearly as much for me as like Remedy Lane or B or Perfect Element. We saw Pain of Salvation on the Passing Light of Day tour. Didn't
it was before Passing Light of Day came out, I believe.
Was it? Yeah, it was before that.
It would have been
2014.
2014.
Yeah.
I recommend giving Panther some other listens. Another band I think is essential for 2010s prog metal, with more of like maybe more in the sludge metal like coming out of bat is Intronaut. Valley of Smoke, excellent record. The Direction of Last Things, excellent record. So I would say Intronaut's another, and I think I will probably pick one of their albums soon for Raw Beef, so stay tuned for that.
2010's Mastodon is also good,
Sick.
Despite Jim's extremely cringe takes on it.
I don't have strong feelings about 2010's Mastodon.
What did he say?
You definitely have shit talked 2010's Mastodon before.
He said he didn't like the new one, but he said he wasn't going to listen to it. He was like, I don't like it, but I'm not going to listen to it.
God, this guy is so
It's probably
based.
not. Yeah, why would I listen to it?
It's not 28 years old yet. So
Holy shit!
Exactly. Yeah, it has to have been released at least the number of years that I've been alive.
I actually can't
ago.
quite comprehend how based this man is. I can't do it.
Yeah, I don't have strong feelings about 2010's Mastodon. It's I definitely like the early stuff the best.
They were nominated for a Grammy the other night. Dream Theater took it home.
Yeah, good for Dream Theater, man.
Yep.
Pretty sick. I mean, the Grammys are pretty much bullshit, but
I was happy to see Dream Theater win. I was happy to see Esperanza Spalding win another Grammy. She's got 5 now, I think.
You know who else won?
That was fun.
You know who else won a Grammy? Big one? Your girl.
I don't.
She won 3 of them.
She won 3?
Get it right.
Literally, who are we talking about?
She won 3 of them, yeah.
Jake's waifu.
Literally, who are we talking about?
Jake's waifu.
Olivia Rodrigo.
Who's Jake's waifu?
My waifu.
Who's your waifu?
Olivia Rodrigo.
Olivia Rodrigo, yeah.
Oh. I don't know who that is.
You don't know who that is? She's huge.
We've talked about her
Like physically?
We've memed about her really hard in the.
She's a giant. She's like 7 feet tall.
We've memed about her so much, like, and you've participated in
Guys,
the memes.
If it came out recently, then I haven't heard it. And also, of course, I participated in the meme. I don't have to have listened to something to have an opinion on it.
God damn it!
In fact, it's better. It's better not to listen to something.
I just said God damn it because
it's better
I can't
not to listen
handle,
to something and develop your opinion.
I said God damn it because I just can never be that based, and my self-esteem is suffering right now.
When I say that we should listen to music in a vacuum, I mean we should come up with our opinions about music in a vacuum.
Like outer space where there can't be sound. That's where we should listen to music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
You're on top of it. You were picking
These
up
mathematical intuitions to just figure out whether the music's good. That's how you do it. That's what I do.
Get someone else to
just consult the
transcribe
Oracle.
it, and
Oracle,
then
is this
read the
good?
music. Just read it. Just read the sheet music.
It's like was it from Amadeus or whatever, the Oscar winner? Where he did that, like he's like listening to it in his head or something. Yeah.
Great movie. Great fucking movie.
Yeah, it really is.
All right, Periphery and TesseracT are both terrible bands, and I hope everyone has a nice evening.